Hi, everyone. I'm Patricia Raskin, and I have the pleasure of interviewing Rabbi Rachel Zerin, who is the Associate Rabbi at Beth-El Temple in West Hartford, Connecticut. She served at Temple Emanu-El in Providence for 5 years as the Assistant Rabbi, where she grew the youth and family programming, she oversaw adult learning, and created holiday programs for people of all ages. She also led spirited services and more. Rabbi Zerin served on the Rhode Island Commission on Prejudice and Bias, worked for the Cambridge Interfaith Program Summer School at Cambridge University, and was founder of If We Serve, an interfaith service learning retreat. Welcome, Rabbi Zerin.
Thank you so much, Patricia. It's so nice to be able to join you for this conversation.
So, as we celebrate the centennial milestone, what aspects of Jewish tradition or values do you believe is essential that we preserve for our future generations?
In many ways, I think the answer is everything. One of the things that I treasure so deeply about Judaism is that it is a tradition that holds these timeless truths and timeless pearls of wisdom that can adapt and change and modify to all different kinds of settings and circumstances. Judaism has always been a tradition of adapting and changing to the circumstances that we are in. The fact that the Torah was given in the desert, looking forward towards entering the land of Israel, and then the Judaism that we know was a Judaism that was really formed in exile from Israel, looking towards a hopeful future of return. I think gives us an inheritance of a tradition that is always helpful, right? That always has these kernels of wisdom. Sometimes it takes effort, of course, to sort of peel away the layers of what is anchored in a particular time or place to find that timeless piece. But I hope that we carry with it all of that, including the ability to adapt and change constantly.
And speaking of that, adapting and changing, how do you see the role of the rabbi evolving in response to our society shifting?
It's a really good question, and I often think about how much things have changed even in my 8 years as a rabbi. I started in working in 2016, which of course was a very politically tumultuous time, and the number of shifts I've seen in Jewish life, first unfortunately with the Tree of Life massacre and the changes that that triggered in the way we think about safety and security, of course, then the pandemic, and the major shifts in the way we live our lives, but also in the ways that we connect as a community. And I think for many people in the ways that they think about what is important in their lives, right? What is the priority for them in their lives? And then, of course, October 7th of this past year, both in terms of our relationship with Israel and also in terms of our own sense of safety and security when it comes to anti-Semitism here in America. So in really not a large amount of time, there have been a lot of shifts. There are many parts of my job that I constantly think, I never thought this was part of being a rabbi. The active intruder trainings and things like that. At its core, though, being a rabbi is still about showing up for people. And to me, it comes down to really one word, which is connecting.
Mm.
Helping people connect to each other, helping people connect to tradition and to text and to teaching and to that ancient wisdom, helping all of those things connect to each other when we come together as individuals, connecting with other individuals in community, connecting through ritual, through prayer, through study. It all comes down to connection. So how is the job of the rabbi evolving? It's evolving in a lot of different ways. And a lot of that has to do with the way that the world around us is evolving. There are new and different ways of connecting, many of which are a blessing, some of which become a barrier. people who get comfortable in remote ways of connecting and forget the parts that we miss by connecting face to face, person to person. There are changes in family structures and economics that change the way that we function as family units, and therefore that we need and seek support from each other. But at the end of the day, it still all comes down to connection. How can I help people connect to each other and to Judaism?
That's beautifully said, truly. And connection is it's at the core of everything. It's one of our core values, really, is being
Absolutely.
able to connect. And also, feeling safe and secure. So that's also another one. Can you share a memorable story or experience that you had when you were in the clergy as an assistant rabbi at Temple Emanu-El that you think encapsulates the spirit of our congregation?
There are three that come to mind, so you'll forgive me that I will share three instead of just one. One of the most memorable experiences for me was always Educational Weekend, which was not just a moment. It was honestly a year-long process. As soon as one Educational Weekend ended, we started planning for the next one. But I think that really speaks to how Temple Emanu-El is really a community of people who are both interesting and interested. That was one of the things that I love so much about the Emanu-El community, and that I treasured about being a part of it. The fact that members of the congregation would come together eager to bring a scholar in residence to our community, not necessarily on the New York Times bestseller list, but a real scholar of some niche field in Judaism, eager to put together a comprehensive weekend with a variety of learning opportunities that hundreds of people would show up over the course of that weekend to learn, to connect with each other, with the learning, with the prayer experiences, to grow, and that weekend sort of grew into a whole program of events leading up to that weekend, following up from that weekend. Really just speaks volumes. Of course, the weekend itself was always a joy. I got to meet a lot of really interesting people. I got to learn a lot from it myself. But the process of putting that weekend together was also such a joy. And like I said, really speaks volumes about the Temple Emanu-El community, and the ways that people are so engaged. Interesting and interested is always what it comes down to for me.
Yes.
The second highlight that I come back to and often think about is Shabbat Chai.
Which
When
we
I think
still
about
have. We
which
still
you
have,
still have, I
and
know,
it's
and which, to be
wonderful.
honest, I
And
am
it's
tempted to take a
wonderful.
Shabbat off from here and come and join in. Music is something very dear to my heart. Joyful, engaged prayer experiences are dear to my heart. And it really all came together so beautifully with Shabbat Chai. I really remember transcendent moments where the whole room was filled, sometimes bursting to the seams, with song and clapping and joy, and even the chaotic noise of children running around the room. All of that just was such pure expression of the joy of Shabbat, the joy of tefillah, of prayer, that joy of community coming together, and then to cap that off with a Shabbat dinner that lasted sometimes long into the night. I was often one of the last ones to leave, and I'm proud to wear that as a badge of honor. Was just such a highlight. The last memory that comes to mind, not necessarily quite as joyful, but I think certainly poignant. I often, when I look back on the spring of 2020, am blown away by the ways that we rapidly pivoted in order to meet the needs of the community in a world turned upside down. And I think those will always be some of the most meaningful months of my rabbinate. The whole world changed in an instant, And I remember fraught conversations in the weeks leading up to the shutdown, trying to think about how we could make educational weekend, for example, work in a few weeks. You know, could we make it smaller? All of which seemed like a joke just weeks later when everything shut down. But then I also remember the ways that we so rapidly pivoted to creating opportunities for people to connect in a world of disconnection.
And online, there was a lot of online opportunity.
Exactly. Every day there was something. I know there were a couple weeks till we got up and running, once we did, every day and often multiple times a day, there were opportunities to connect with the Emanu-El community. There was learning opportunities, there were prayer opportunities, and then we found ways to creatively reach out to people, not just through the computer, whether it was dropping off little care packages, whether it was the Simchat Torah walk around the neighborhood with different yard signs talking about different Torah portions, whether it was the one-on-one phone calls. I even remember some pastoral visits. You know, that's a big part of being a rabbi, is visiting people who are sick, who are in need of assistance. I remember sidewalk visits. Never in my wildest dreams in rabbinical school would I have thought a sidewalk visit, waving to someone through a window, would be meaningful. But I look back on those early months of the pandemic, that spring and summer of 2020, and I'm just in awe of the ways that we pivoted so rapidly to do things we never would have imagined doing 6 months before.
Yeah.
And I think really showed up for people and offered opportunities for connection in a time of such disconnection in a way that was so profoundly meaningful.
Mhm.
Even though it's
And
not a joyful memory, it's a really moving memory for me.
but when you look at that and how quickly things changed and pivoted and we still stayed connected, looking ahead for the next 100 years, what are your hopes and your aspirations for the future of Judaism?
Oh, it's a great question. You know, I mentioned before that in my short time of being a rabbi, there have been a lot of major shifts, right? The pandemic being one, October 7th being another. And every time we come upon one of these shifts, one of the places that I find strength is thinking back to the way our people must have felt, for example, when the temple was destroyed and they were exiled from Jerusalem. That everything changed in an instant, and you want to talk about the world being turned upside down. Well, certainly that was a moment of the world being turned upside down. I could point to a dozen other moments in Jewish history. I find an odd sense of strength and comfort in that, because it tells me that we have faced challenges before and we have survived, so we can face challenges again and we can survive. We are a people who pivots. We are a people who adapt. We are a people who pick ourselves up and find new ways of doing things. We are a resilient people.
Yes.
And so when you ask me, what do I see in the next 100 years, Judaism being like, my gut reaction is to say, I hope we don't change at all, which means I hope everything changes. Right? I hope we stay as adaptable and resilient and able to pivot and able to pick ourselves up and keep on going. I have no idea what the world will look like in 100 years, but I know that we will be doing meaningful things
Mhm.
in the same way we have always done, which will look everything and nothing like the way we are doing it now.
Yeah. Thank you. This is so meaningful. Last question. What advice do you offer to aspiring rabbis or those considering a career in Jewish leadership?
Love the work, love the people. And I know I've talked about this before. I believe it was even the subject of one of the final Divrei Torah I gave at Temple Emanu-El. It all has to come first from love. I think about the teaching about the blessing that is recited by the Kohanim, the priests, before reciting the priestly blessing, right? That they were commanded to recite this blessing, be'ahava, in love. And there's a teaching that says that if a Kohen does not love all the people, they cannot bless.
Mhm.
That blessing can only come if they love all the people they are blessing.
Mhm.
And I think about that for all of us who serve the Jewish people.
Mhm.
It has to come from a place of love, love of Torah, love of Judaism, love of community, love of people. This is not easy work. It's not easy because there are pandemics and there are massacres on our people in Israel and there are security threats. It's not easy because we are with people in the hardest moments of their life.
Mhm.
And it is profoundly meaningful, but also hard to witness and accompany through those moments.
Mhm.
But if you love the people and you love the work and you love the tradition,
Mhm.
it is also profoundly joyful, even through all of that.
Thank you.
I get to work or I come home from a long day, and even when I am exhausted, and even when it's been a challenging day, I still think I am the luckiest person in the world to get to do what I do.
Mhm. Thank you so much, Rabbi Zerin. Very heartfelt, beautifully stated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Rabbi Rachel Zerin is the Associate Rabbi at Beth-El Temple in West Hartford, Connecticut. She served at Temple Emanu-El in Providence for 5 years as the Assistant Rabbi. And just wonderful to hear from you, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Bye for now.